Have you ever tried to get a teenager genuinely excited about something they have to do? I mean, it's like the ultimate challenge, isn't it? That line between, ugh, another mandatory task and something actually meaningful, well, it can get super blurry. So what's the secret? What turns a chore into a calling? Well, we're about to dive into some really fascinating research that actually found an answer, and it might surprise you. So let's really frame this with one big question. How on earth does a single class in seventh grade, still manage to change a person's life 5 years down the road when they're a senior in high school? Seriously, think about it. Do you remember much from seventh grade? I know I don't. But one researcher was absolutely determined to figure out what makes an experience like that stick. And let me tell you, the answer is probably not what you're thinking.
All right, so the core of this whole puzzle, it's something educators, parents, mentors, pretty much everyone grapples with. For so many teenagers, required spiritual education, in this specific study, it was daily prayer or Tefila, it can just feel so disconnected, boring, irrelevant, just another box you have to check off before you can get on with your day.
So, what is the secret sauce here? How can the exact same program be a total drag for one student, but a completely life-changing experience for the person sitting right next to them? That's the big question, and we're going to unpack a doctoral dissertation by a researcher named Rabbi Moshe Drelich, who dug deep into this very puzzle. Let's see what he found out.
Okay, so to solve a puzzle this complex, you can't just ask a simple question. No, you need a solid plan. You need a way to really crack the code of what these students were actually experiencing.
And his plan was pretty brilliant. He used what's called a mixed methods approach, which is just a fancy way of saying he tackled it from two different angles. Think about it like this. First, you get the numbers. You use surveys to find out what happened. But then, and this is so important, you follow up with interviews to get the real personal stories, the why behind the numbers. You absolutely need both to see the full picture.
And get this, the journey he took for this research is what makes it so powerful. This was not a quick, one-time snapshot. He surveyed students about their seventh grade experience, and then he waited for 5 full years. Then he surveyed them again as high school seniors. That long-term view is what gives this study its real teeth. And to top it off, he then interviewed students from both ends of the spectrum, the ones who had the most positive experiences and the ones who had the most negative, to really get to the heart of what made all the difference.
All right, so now we get to the good stuff. Let's look at the first set of clues that popped out from the investigation. The data. What did the cold, hard numbers actually tell us?
So the survey asked about everything you could think of. Things like praying with friends, how the room was decorated, if they did special activities, singing, the whole shebang. But out of all of those different things, what do you think the data pointed to as the single biggest factor? The one thing that had the most impact on whether a student had a positive spiritual experience? Take a guess.
The answer was, well, it was crystal clear. The number one factor by a long shot was students seeing their teacher praying authentically. I'm not talking about just teaching about it or even just leading it. I mean genuinely living it right there in front of them. The teacher's own personal, authentic engagement was the most powerful predictor of a student's positive experience. Wow.
So here's how the numbers really start to tell a story. First and foremost, you've got teacher authenticity. The data showed that was the absolute top predictor. Then, coming in strong right behind it, was communal singing, that feeling of creating something powerful together. And when you put those things together, what's the long-term result? Well, 5 years later, those same students were way less likely to feel like prayer was a chore or a burden. It just goes to show, a positive start can have a huge, lasting ripple effect.
But look, numbers only ever tell us part of the story, right? They tell us the what. To really understand the why, we have to go deeper. We have to get into the real, lived human experience of the students themselves.
The data gave us the clues, for sure. But the truly profound insights, those came from the interviews. This is where that second part of the research comes in. It's called a phenomenological approach, which really just means it's less about stats and way more about understanding what it was actually like for someone, their personal lived experience. And out of all those deep, honest conversations, 5 major themes started to emerge. Okay, so theme number 1 is, well, it's adolescence itself. I mean, this is a time in life that is just defined by this powerful, driving need for autonomy, for the freedom to figure out who you are and to make your own choices. So right away, you have this built-in tension with any activity that's required because it feels like a restraint. And any successful program has to figure out how to navigate that fundamental conflict.
And that tension leads us right into the most critical theme of all, and it perfectly backs up what the survey data showed. It's the teacher-student relationship. You know, teenagers have this uncanny built-in detector for authenticity, a BS meter, if you will. They didn't need a perfect, flawless role model. They needed a real one, a teacher who was actually engaged in what they were doing and who genuinely cared about them as people. That was the absolute game changer.
So 3 other key themes really filled out the rest of the picture. First, there was this need for individual meaning. Students had to find their own why for doing it, a personal connection. Second, community was huge, that feeling of belonging, of being in it together. And finally, and you might not expect this one, the physical environment itself actually mattered. Simple things like having enough light or space to move around, it made a real difference.
Okay, so we have all these amazing insights. What's the bottom line here? How do we take all this and turn it into something practical, a kind of toolkit that can actually help create a lasting, positive impact for young people?
Well, here it is, the practical toolkit. And number 1 with the bullet is cultivating those genuine, authentic, caring relationships. It's about connecting with students, not just policing them. Next up, you've got to create a culture of community and gratitude. Then, you have to encourage individual goals, because one size just does not fit all. And finally, don't overlook the simple stuff. Pay attention to the physical space you're in.
And the study leaves us with this one last, really powerful piece of advice. It's all about vision. It's about seeing your students not just for who they are right now, in this moment, but for who they have the potential to become. It's a fundamental shift in perspective, and it can change absolutely everything.
And all of this leaves us with one final, pretty powerful question to think about. I mean, yeah, this study was about prayer, about spiritual education, but these principles, they feel universal, don't they? Just think about it. Math class, history, music, sports, anything, really. What could we unlock in our students? Heck, what could we unlock in each other if we led with authenticity and a true sense of community? Just imagine.